Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Today we're looking at a recent issue of 7 Days, Santé and Conso.
Oh yeah, the French magazine.
Exactly.
Of Santé and Conso.
They cover all kinds of things, from health news to consumer trends. And this issue had some really interesting articles.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, there's one that caught my eye about a potential connection between high-potency cannabis and mental health issues.
Huh, interesting.
But before you think, oh, another cannabis is bad story, this one's a bit different.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It goes deeper and looks at how cannabis might actually be impacting our biology, like at a fundamental level.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they talk about something called DNA methylation.
DNA methylation.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it is either, so maybe we can break that down a bit later.
Sounds good.
First though, let's clarify what they mean by psychotic disorders.
Right, because that could be a pretty broad term.
So when they're talking about psychotic disorders, they're referring to mental health conditions where people might experience things like hallucinations or delusions, or they might have trouble thinking clearly.
Okay, so some pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But back to that DNA methylation thing.
Yeah, so what is that all about?
Okay, so imagine your DNA is like an instruction manual for your body, right?
Okay.
Sometimes there are these extra notes or like side comments written in the margins that can change how those instructions are actually carried out.
Oh, interesting.
And that's kind of what DNA methylation is like.
Like little annotations.
Exactly. There are these little chemical tags that can attach to your DNA, and they can either turn certain genes on or off, or even like dim their activity.
So it's not changing the actual DNA sequence?
Right. It's more like a dimmer switch on a light.
I see. So you're not changing the bulb itself, but you're changing how bright it shines.
Exactly.
That's a good analogy.
So how does all this relate to cannabis?
Well, researchers have found that people who use high-potency cannabis daily,
The stuff with high THC levels.
right, like 10% or higher,
Oh, yeah.
they have a 5 times greater risk of developing a psychotic disorder.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah, and what makes this study really unique is that they actually looked at changes in DNA methylation in these individuals.
And did they find anything?
They did. They found some pretty big alterations, particularly in genes that are involved in how our cells produce energy and how our immune systems function.
So the heavy cannabis use is potentially linked to these changes in DNA methylation.
Right.
And those changes could be contributing to an increased risk of developing these psychotic disorders.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect.
Wow, so we're talking about a potential biological mechanism here,
Precisely.
not just correlation.
Right. This study suggests that there might be a direct causal link.
That's huge.
It is. And one gene in particular called CAVIN1 really stood out in the study.
Even one.
Yeah, it showed some really dramatic alterations in its methylation patterns.
And what does this CAVIN1 gene do?
Well, it's involved in a bunch of important cellular processes.
Like what?
Things like cell signaling, how cells communicate with each other,
Okay.
and maintaining the overall stability of the cell, and even how cells produce energy.
So basically it's a pretty important gene.
It is, and researchers think that these changes in CAVIN1 could be a key piece of the puzzle when it comes to understanding the link between cannabis use and these psychotic disorders.
Okay, so we've got these changes in DNA methylation potentially affecting how CAVIN1 functions.
Right?
And that could have ripple effects throughout the cell.
Exactly. And those ripple effects could potentially lead to the development of psychotic disorders.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the big picture here, but there's one thing I keep coming back to.
What's that?
If these changes in DNA methylation, those dimmer switch tweaks we talked about,
Right?
if they're happening because of cannabis use, could they potentially be passed down to future generations?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
I know, right? The study didn't really address that, but it's a pretty wild thought.
It is.
Like our lifestyle choices could have transgenerational effects.
It's both fascinating and a little bit unnerving, right?
It is. It makes you think twice about everything you do.
It really does.
But seriously, if this research pans out, it could have huge implications for public health policy.
Absolutely. Imagine if we had to start considering the potential epigenetic effects of cannabis use, not just on the individual, but on their offspring as well.
That's a game changer.
It is. And it could even lead to personalized medicine approaches where people could get screened for their genetic susceptibility to these epigenetic changes.
And receive tailored advice or interventions.
Exactly. We're just at the beginning of understanding all of this. But this research is opening up some really important avenues for exploration.
Okay, before we go too deep down the DNA rabbit hole, let's switch gears a bit
Sounds good.
and look at some of the other health and consumer news briefs from this magazine.
Okay, what do you have?
Well, there are a few here that I think you'll find pretty interesting.
I'm all ears.
All right, so this first one is for all the busy bees out there, juggling work and family and life.
Who are still trying to squeeze in a workout.
Yeah, exactly.
It's tough.
It is. But guess what?
Uh,
Being a weekend warrior might be just as good as spreading your exercise throughout the week.
oh, really?
Uh,
So like cramming all your workouts into Saturday and Sunday?
Pretty much.
Interesting.
I know, right?
I thought consistency was key.
Ooh, this study found that people who did all their exercise in a couple of longer sessions on the weekend,
Okay.
they actually got similar health benefits
Wow.
to those who worked out, more regularly throughout the week.
So like what kind of health benefits are we talking about?
Reduced risk of heart disease,
Oh, wow.
metabolic issues, and even some types of cancer.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty encouraging.
It is, but what do they mean by intense activity?
Good question.
Because I'm pretty sure my Netflix marathons don't count.
Definitely not.
So what qualifies?
We're talking about activities that get your heart rate up,
Okay.
and you're breaking a sweat.
So like what kind of things?
Things like brisk walking, jogging,
Okay.
swimming, cycling,
Got it.
dancing, or playing sports.
Well, things that really get you moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is to elevate your heart rate and break a sweat.
All right, so basically if you're planning a big hike or a bike ride on the weekend, you don't have to stress about missing that weekday gym session.
Exactly.
That's good to know.
All right, here's another one that caught my attention.
Okay.
This one's a little less feel-good, though.
Oh.
Apparently, some hair straightening products are being linked to kidney problems.
Kidney problems.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It is.
What kind of hair straightening products are we talking about?
It seems like the culprit is a chemical called glycolic acid.
Glycolic acid.
Yeah, it's used in some of these products.
And how does that cause kidney problems?
Apparently, this stuff can actually form tiny crystals in your kidneys.
Yeah. Tiny crystals in your kidneys.
Yeah. Ouch.
I know it can lead to pain. I bet. And even serious kidney damage in some cases.
That's wild.
It is, right?
It's crazy to think that something like getting your hair done could have such serious health consequences.
I know it's a good reminder to always do your research before you use any products.
Read those labels.
That's exactly, even if they seem totally harmless.
You never know what could be lurking in those bottles.
Okay, ready for another one?
Hit me.
This one's a real head scratcher.
Okay.
A 19-year-old in China was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
Wait a minute.
What?
19 years old.
19 years old.
Isn't Alzheimer's something that typically affects older people?
You would think, right?
Yeah, like I thought it was something that happened way later in life.
Exactly. Alzheimer's is usually diagnosed in people over 65.
Exactly.
So to see it in someone so young is incredibly rare.
It's almost unheard of.
It is, and it has doctors and researchers totally baffled.
I can imagine. So what could be going on here?
Who asked them the million-dollar question? Could this be a completely different form of Alzheimer's?
That's one of the things that researchers are trying to figure out.
Okay.
This case is so unusual that it really challenges our understanding of how the disease develops and progresses.
It's like it throws everything we thought we knew out the window.
Exactly. It suggests that there might be other factors
Beyond just age.
Right.
Like maybe genetic predispositions.
possibly.
Or even environmental triggers that we haven't identified yet.
It's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
To think that this disease could be affecting younger and younger people.
Definitely. But, maybe this case, as tragic as it is, could help us learn more about the disease.
I hope so.
It could hold some clues that might lead to new research or even new treatments.
I agree. This is definitely something we need to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Okay, ready for our final news brief?
Let's do it.
Buckle up, because this one is about flooded deserts.
Flooded deserts.
Yeah, you heard that right. Floods in the Sahara Desert.
The Sahara Desert.
The Sahara Desert.
That's crazy.
I know, right? It sounds like something out of a movie,
It does.
but it's true.
So what happened?
Well, the Sahara is known for its scorching sun and endless dunes.
Right. It's the driest place on Earth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But recently, it experienced something that hadn't happened in over 50 years.
What's that?
Significant flooding.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
The Sahara Desert flooded.
The Sahara Desert flooded.
I can't even picture that.
It's hard to wrap your head around it, right?
It is those vast stretches of sand turned into rivers and lakes.
Pretty much.
So what caused this sudden downpour in the driest place on Earth?
Well, the Sahara does get occasional rainfall.
Right. But not like this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This time it was different. There were these unusually intense downpours
Okay.
that just dumped a massive amount of water onto the landscape.
And the ground couldn't absorb it all?
That's right. The dry riverbeds, they're called wadis.
Wadis.
Yeah. They were quickly overwhelmed and flash floods just swept across the region.
Wow. I can only imagine the impact that had on the people and the environment.
Yeah, it's significant.
What kind of impact are we talking about?
Well, these floods can have both positive and negative impacts.
Okay, how so?
On the one hand, they can bring much-needed water to drought-stricken areas,
Right, that makes sense.
and they can help replenish groundwater reserves.
So that's the good side?
Yeah.
What about the bad side?
Well, on the other hand, they can also cause significant damage to infrastructure.
Of course.
They can disrupt those fragile desert ecosystems,
Right.
and they can displace local communities.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
It is, but I think it really highlights how even the most extreme environments are vulnerable to the effects of climate change.
Definitely.
The Sahara floods are a stark reminder that climate change is a global phenomenon impacting every corner of our planet.
We're seeing shifts in weather patterns everywhere.
Exactly. More intense rainfall in some areas, prolonged droughts in others.
It's happening faster than a lot of scientists predicted.
It's scary, isn't it?
It is.
We hear about things like melting glaciers and rising sea levels.
Right, those are the usual suspects.
But flooded deserts,
That's a new one.
it's a whole new level of weirdness
It is, and it underscores the importance of taking action.
to mitigate climate change.
Exactly. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions
Invest in renewable energy
and adopt more sustainable practices.
in all aspects of our lives.
It's not just about individual choices anymore.
Right. It's about systemic change.
We can't just sit back and wait for the next flooded desert to make headlines.
We need to act now before it's too late.
I agree.
Okay, let's circle back to one of those health news briefs for a minute.
Sure, which one?
The one about Mucinex and fertility.
Oh, yeah, that one caught my eye too.
It's been all over social media.
People claiming it helped them get pregnant.
Exactly. But is there any truth to those claims?
I am skeptical.
Me too. So let's break it down.
Okay.
The main ingredient in Mucinex is guaifenesin.
Guaifenesin.
Yeah, it's an expectorant.
Which means
It basically thins out the mucus in your airways.
to help you cough up phlegm. So how did this cough medicine become a fertility booster?
Well, the logic goes something like this.
Okay.
If guaifenesin can thin out mucus in the lungs,
Right.
maybe it can also thin out cervical mucus,
Oh, I see.
making it easier for sperm to reach the egg.
Interesting theory, but does it actually work?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is the research is pretty limited.
So no conclusive evidence.
Not really. There have been a few small studies, but the results have been inconclusive.
So it's more anecdotal evidence than anything else.
Exactly. Just because it worked for one person doesn't mean it'll work for everyone.
Right.
And there could be all sorts of other factors at play.
It's important to remember that fertility is complex.
Definitely.
There are so many variables involved,
It's always best to talk to your doctor before trying any DIY health hacks.
especially when it comes to something as important as fertility.
Exactly. Rely on evidence-based medicine.
And seek professional guidance.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this section.
We have.
From flooded deserts to DIY fertility treatments.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. But before we move on, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned.
Sounds good.
What are some key takeaways that you think our listeners should be pondering?
Where I think one of the biggest takeaways is that everything is connected.
How so?
The choices we make about our bodies, the way we interact with the environment, the information we consume at all, has ripple effects.
Ripple effects.
Yeah, they extend beyond ourselves and impact the world around us.
That's deep.
We're not just isolated individuals.
All part of a larger system.
Exactly. And understanding that interconnectedness can help us make more informed decisions and take actions that contribute to a healthier, more sustainable future.
That's a great point. I love that.
Thanks.
Okay. Ready to dive into the last part of our deep dive?
Let's do it. All right, so diving into this last section.
This one really hit home for me.
Oh, yeah.
It's about organ donation in Morocco.
Organ donation.
Yeah, it's not something we talk about a lot.
It's not, but it's so important.
This article really highlights the need for organ transplants worldwide
It's a huge issue.
and the challenges they face right here in Morocco.
But like, what kind of challenges?
Well, did you know that only 645 kidney transplants have been performed in Morocco so far?
Wow, that's a really low number.
It is, and it really shows the gap between the number of people who need transplants.
And the limited supply of available organs.
Exactly.
So why is the number so low?
It's a complex issue.
I bet.
There are a lot of factors involved.
Like what?
Cultural beliefs, religious sensitivities, lack of awareness about organ donation.
It's a sensitive topic, for sure.
It is, But the article mentioned this organization called Association Reigns.
Association reigns.
Yeah, they're led by Professor Amel Burkia,
I've heard of her.
and they're doing amazing work to raise awareness about organ donation.
That's great to hear.
They're encouraging more people to consider becoming donors.
It's inspiring to see people stepping up to address this need.
It really is.
They're literally saving lives.
And it shows that even small actions can make a difference.
Right. One person becoming a donor can impact multiple lives.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
Okay, switching gears a bit now.
Okay, what's next?
This one's for all the students out there.
Oh, university life.
Exactly.
What about it?
It seems like students here in Morocco are still facing challenges when it comes to university dining.
University dining.
Yeah, the food in the cafeterias.
Oh, right.
The article talks about ongoing issues with food poisoning
Oh, no.
and general dissatisfaction with the options available.
Despite efforts by the USC?
The national organization responsible for university services.
Yeah, I know them.
So it seems like there's still work to be done.
There's always room for improvement.
Exactly.
But it's great that students are advocating for better conditions.
I agree. It's important to hold institutions accountable.
Even for something like cafeteria food.
Right. Because access to safe and nutritious food is important for everyone.
Especially students who are already juggling so much.
I totally agree.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We've covered a lot today.
We did.
From DNA methylation to flooded deserts to organ donation to university dining.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
Oh,
But it just goes to show how interconnected everything really is.
I agree.
Our choices, our health, the environment, the information we consume. It all plays a role.
And it all has an impact.
So we encourage our listeners to keep exploring these topics.
Do your own research.
Seek out different perspectives.
And form your own opinions.
Stay curious, everyone, and keep those minds engaged.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.